Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, Iowa football, top 10 players heading into 2024. And Dill, a little bit of juice around this program heading into the fall, obviously, bringing in Tim Lester to take over this offense. And I find myself saying the same thing that I said about this Iowa program 12 months ago. If this offense can take a step, and that is just a small step in the right direction, they're a really dangerous team in the Big Ten. Can Tim Lester do that on the offensive side of the football? That's the question. You look at the rest of this Iowa team, ton of experience, ton of really solid football players. That's what makes Iowa so consistent year after year, getting into the top 10 players. Before we do it, as always, just want to give a massive shout out to all of you guys who've been rocking with the content and the deep dives during the summer months. Stuff means the world to the boys. We love doing it. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, what a day to rep the Iowa wrestling t-shirt. Fired up to get into it. And let's talk about not only, in my opinion, the best player on this Iowa program, but one of the best players in college football is Sebastian Castro.
Yeah, I mean, he is unbelievable. He just plays at like a different speed, I feel like, than most other guys you look. I mean, when the ball's in the air, closing on it really fast. When a screen's thrown out to the flat, closing on that really fast. Tackles really, really physically. Hey, just as complete of a nickel corner as you can want to see in the world. I think he'd be a really good safety as well. So he provides you that versatility that I think you kind of need at that spot. There's not much I'll say. He's the man for this Iowa team.
He got overshadowed by, again, one of the best cornerbacks in the country last year, Cooper DeJean. Sebastian Castro, just throughout the 2023 season, did his thing. Dill, so sticky in coverage. And that's what you need at that nickel position. And we found ourselves saying this a lot. That nickel spot just kind of gets overlooked by a lot of college football fans. It is becoming a crucial position to get right on a defense. And I mean, Iowa's got one of the best ones in the country heading into 2024, going to our number 2 player in the country. Let's talk about linebacker Jay Higgins. Anytime you put up 171 tackles, you're going to find yourself towards top of the list when we're starting to rank these players. 49 run stops in the 2023 season. Dill, we've done a lot of these top 10 rankings. I have not seen a number that high. And then you turn on the film and just say, yeah, this is what you want in an off-ball middle linebacker, consistently fitting the run well, tackling in space, going sideline to sideline. You start looking at, is there a hole in Jay Higgins' game heading into 2024? If there is, I can't really identify one.
And the big thing that separates him from a lot of really good middle linebackers is his ability to fit blocks up, take them on, shut them, and make plays. A lot of guys I think you're starting to see as that position's requiring a little bit more athleticism. I think that ability to just take a lineman on in the hole, take a fullback on in the hole, take a tight end on in the hole, stack it, shed it. I think you're seeing that go by the wayside a little bit, not with Jay Higgins. I mean, when he meets a guy in the hole, gets his hands on him, sheds blocks, makes tackles, but he does everything else. Really good in coverage, really has a good sense of that cover too. Iowa likes to
really good in coverage. And I don't know how Coach Parker does it, but every single Iowa player on the team is so clean in terms of their drops, getting hands-on footballs, getting into throwing windows. Jay Higgins, I mean, certainly one of those guys. Number 3 player, Dill. Let's talk about his running mate, Nick Jackson. Came over from Virginia prior to the 2023 season. As I was doing my prep for this, watching some games back, Dill, it is massive that they're returning these 2 linebackers. I don't know if I can name you many linebacker duos that are as good as these 2 heading into 2024.
A lot of the same things you say about, obviously,
Jay Higgins, you say about Nick Jackson.
Higgins, you say about they're very similar players. Both really patrol that position really, really well. I mean, you just love this linebacker core, probably the best in the country. I don't even know if that's really arguable because these 2 are absolute hammers.
And it makes sense why Ben Keeter's taking a year off from football. Probably wasn't going to see the field behind these 2 linebackers, focusing on wrestling, get a national championship for the Hawks, go back to football in 2025. They'll going to our number 4 player. Let's talk about the golden child for this Iowa program. Obviously stayed home. Xavier is a guy that, when I think of him and you turn on the film, it starts with the versatility. Like, there's just anything you want to ask this kid to do, he can do it. He can get involved in the run game. He can hold up in man coverage. He can play that Hawkins safety spot as like a cover 1 defender as well. When you're a safety and you have that much versatility, especially in the conference in the Big Ten, where one game you might be playing Minnesota in 30-degree weather. You got to have safeties come up and tackle on the run game. The next week, you might be going to Southern California and playing USC. You have to be able to operate in space. Xavier can do both of those at an extremely high level. In the modern Big Ten era, you need guys like this on defense.
And also one of those kind of rare breeds for an Iowa guy who's pretty much been playing since he got on campus, where, again, you kind of look at all these Iowa guys like a Sebastian Castro, even like graduates, redshirt seniors. That's kind of when you start to see them really take off. I mean, he took off the second he got to this Iowa program. And again, you kind of like look at how good they are developing guys, how good these older guys play by the time they've kind of got some season. He had good numbers last year, obviously, really, really good player. But you almost can see a bigger jump maybe than some of these other guys that we're talking about just because he's so much younger.
He's just and this is not a shot at the rest of this Iowa roster. You talk about just pure athleticism. He's a little bit different. There was a reason he was a top 50 national prospect coming out of high school. You're right. I'm fired up to see the development going from year 2 to year 3. Going to our number 5 player, and let's talk about a guy that I feel like people are just forgetting about due to the injury, Luke Lachey. And Iowa is looking for difference makers on the offensive side of the football. Luke Lachey was one of those guys before he went down with injury. We all know he can be one of the best tight ends that you see not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. You know Iowa wants to work through the tight ends. If he can stay healthy and kind of reach the level that I think we all know he can reach, massive things for this Iowa offense.
I mean, again, and for the last 2 years, especially you go back that 2022 year, he was one of those rare guys for Iowa, and they obviously need to do a better job finding those type of guys, developing those type of guys who, when they get their matchup, really can hurt teams. I mean, I go back to that Michigan game in 2022, I kind of watching as a Michigan fan, like, well, there's not really anyone else who you really thought could hurt you, but Luke Lachey was consistently getting his, can catch the ball through traffic, can make plays after the catch. Just a really dynamic tight end. Obviously can block. Everyone on Iowa can block. So very complete tight end. Really the one really effective weapon, it's felt like, when he's been on the field for his time. So, they obviously need to make him a focal point of this offense. I think I would imagine they're going to. But he is that guy who I think can create some situations for teams.
And 2 career drops. You talk about one of the most important things, at least in my mind, when you're talking about tight ends. It's just reliable targets over the middle of the field. Luke Lachey, he doesn't drop balls. Like, when it hits him in the hands, he's making plays. Partially the reason why the boys are so high on him. Going to number 6, and Dill, a guy that was a pleasant surprise for me, going back and looking at some of the numbers, watching some games back. Yaya Black on the inside of that defensive line. I think he has a chance to be really, really good. You talk about that Iowa development. This was a kid that I believe came into Iowa as an offensive tackle, makes the transition. He is extremely athletic. You take a look at 26 run stops. That was 3rd on the team, obviously behind Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. That's an exceptional number from a defensive lineman. 16 quarterback hurries. That was 4th on the team. When you can find a defensive lineman on the inside that can get it done in the run game, can get it done in the pass rush department, that is rare. Another guy that can get his hands on footballs at the line of scrimmage, 5 pass breakups. I think this kid is really, really good for Iowa heading into 2024.
And you mentioned that to be able to be that long, not be able to be pushed around and play with good leverage at that size, but also use those long arms, get it guys extended, get off of blocks, both in the pass and in the run, as you kind of mentioned. I mean, one of those real difference makers at that defensive line spot. I think there's kind of an X gear, I think, him to get to, where I think there were some moments where maybe game to game you felt like, oh, he's really dominating in this game and maybe not making a huge impact on some other ones. And he kind of can steady that out and be impactful every game. I mean, he was elevating that Iowa defense to something they don't always have, especially on that defense.
Yeah, and I was looking for some game records up front. And if you can pair up a really good defensive line with the backers that they have heading into 2024, that's obviously the recipe you're going for. Number 7, Connor Colby, really, really solid for Iowa, has played a ton of football, over 2,000 career sacks, or not career sacks, doesn't give up that many sacks, career snaps, 3rd team All Big Ten. Dill, I'm looking for a step up from Iowa on the offensive line. I think they return a ton of guys from what they had in 2023, and I think that could really help Iowa. You take a look at, seemingly every other program across the country, just with the transfer portal being as active as it is, you don't see programs return almost entire offensive lines like Iowa is kind of doing heading into 2024. A lot of these guys have played a lot of snaps with each other the last couple of years. My question is, and a big storyline for this Iowa program is, can that offensive line kind of get back to where we think it belongs in terms of dominating, establishing the run? We said it. If you give Cade McNamara a run game and some pass protection, he can be a quarterback that makes things happen. You got to be able to give him that, though.
And I thought you saw him and Logan Jones, that talking Connor Colby and Logan Jones, have some really good moments where they were getting up, working up to linebackers in that zone scheme Iowa likes to run. I think a big thing you just need to see in general with Iowa is those tackles need to protect a little bit better. I thought the run blocking was good for the most part, really good at times, maybe not so good at other times. But the pass blocking, or pass protection, I should say, really didn't feel like it was ever particularly great. I think that's where I think you had to see it step up. I think the run blocking, again, I did think there were some good moments where they were getting up to linebackers, creating creases, allowing some of their running backs to make big plays. But I'm looking, again, you kind of said it. They're returning a lot of production. They just need to take a step. They need to be better in pass pro. I think that makes a huge difference for Iowa.
Number 8, running back Lesean Williams, over 800 yards last year, 4.8 yards per carry, 32 missed tackles forced, 2.9 yards after contact. I personally think there's another gear that Lesean Williams can probably reach. And again, I'm being critical, but I think that's also exciting for Iowa fans to hear, because this team could potentially be better in 2024. I think Lesean Williams has the capability of being a difference maker at the running back spot. You want to see him be that in 2024.
And this is an interesting running back room, because honestly, I know we were kind of talking before the show. It's really tight with him and Caleb Johnson. And Caleb Johnson was obviously, his true freshman year was awesome. I didn't think he had a great sophomore year. I think he maybe expected a little bit more, frankly. But that's a two-headed backfield that I think should be really good. Again, I think there's steps they need to take with their offensive line. They're going to return a lot of them, so hopefully you see it. But those two, too, I think just being able to run a little bit more physically, more consistently, I think will be the big thing you're looking. Because when they got their shots, frankly, both of them, Lesean Williams probably a little bit more, they did hit big plays, I felt like. But again, just being able to grind out yards more effectively, have less negative plays, I think that's how I'm looking
You noted something that I think is important. We talked about Iowa struggling in pass pro. I think they got into too many third and longs too consistently in 2023. Lesean Williams, like you said, be a little bit more consistent, be a running back that is going to create quarterback-friendly down and distances, right? Keep this Iowa team outside of that 3rd and 7 range, because that spells trouble. This Iowa offense is just not meant to convert a lot of 3rd and 7s. They're meant to live in those 3rd and 3 or shorter kind of scenarios. You got to make sure as a running back that you're kind of getting those hard yards and setting Iowa up for those kind of circumstances. Going to number 9, Quinn Schulte. They'll just another one of those really good Iowa defensive backs. Really, really good feel and coverage. Can come up and tackle. Not much. I'm probably not the upside that a guy like Xavier has from an athleticism standpoint. Damn good player for the Iowa Hawkeyes in 2023.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'd sum it up. Kind of similar vibe to Nwankpa and obviously Castro and some of these other guys in the secondary, but probably not quite that top end. Yeah, that ultra impact playmaking, but just really solid, doesn't make any mistakes, really, really comfortable and seasoned in that Iowa Phil Parker defense. So ultra valuable to that team, but just not quite that next level prospect maybe that some of the other guys
All right, let me cook here on Caleb Brown. I think this guy can be a difference maker for Iowa on offense. You don't say that a lot about the skill position on the offensive side of the football. They have to do a better job recruiting these kind of guys. They obviously get him from Ohio State. You got to get the football in his hands. This was a former running back at the high school ranks. He's very comfortable operating after the catch. Still only caught 22 passes, had 9 missed tackles forced, over 100 yards after the catch, was a 10-8 guy in the 100-meter coming out of high school. Thick lower half, really good with the football in his hands. We are looking for Iowa to find difference makers on the offensive side of the football. We talked about Luke Lachey being one of them. If Caleb Brown, I have full confidence that Caleb Brown can be a difference maker. You just got to get him his touches. If they can do that, I think Caleb Brown really can make a difference on this offense.
Yeah, and that was the problem. I mean, obviously with Brian Ferentz, you never had the ability to make wide receivers in any way a focal point of that offense. I think that's something you you need to accept that college football is moving in a direction that if you don't have playmakers on the edge and you don't ever use them, it's going to be really, really hard to move the ball. I think when you look, Caleb Brown, you kind of have to be that guy, because you did see those moments, especially when he was taking the ball, when he was getting the ball in the backfield, obviously with a couple of carries, he was obviously catching the ball pretty good towards the end of the year. You were like, well, where has this been? Why weren't we using him a little bit more? Obviously, quarterback plays a huge part of that. They were horrible there after Cade went down. So hopefully Cade can come in and be what we kind of wanted him to be, or what Iowa fans expected, which is just a guy who can manage a football game and get the ball to playmakers. If they can do that for him, it's a huge difference in this offense.
100% agree. And we left Cade off this list. It was hard to put him on this list after 2023. As Michigan fans, we believe in this kid. We watched him win a Big Ten title, beat Ohio State for this Michigan program. We know he can win high-level games. I think a lot of it is changing the offense around him, surrounding him with a little bit more talent, keeping him protected. If you can do that, Cade can be a quarterback that wins you big-time games in the Big Ten. We'll close it out on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.